Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very belated episode. Is that the word I'm looking for? Of limited time only.
Delayed, yes.
Delayed, yeah. This is episode, I believe, 22, and we are recording this episode about a week late, a week and a half late. I was unable to record last week, so what we're doing this week is we are doing our set review for uncommons. This is actually episode 23. The reason that we're going to keep, even though the set's already out, we still do a lot of the show segments and things like that are built around both this set review and the common set review, where we talk about our biggest movers and we move forward with and are always improving ourselves and like our card evaluations and like how the format breaks down. So giving a baseline of where we feel like each card is in the format is pretty important. So starting with uncommons, we rate every uncommon and give it a rating from 0 to 5, as well as sometimes they're sideboard cards or maybe they're cards that you need to have other cards in your deck to make good. So those cards will get, we'll just tell you that and not really give them a rating. The other cards that, and then the common set review that we'll do next time is really we just give commons top 3 in each color. And that gives us like a baseline for like what are the best commons rather than talking about every single common in the set. So that'll be the next episode. This week we're going to do uncommons. And let's just get going. I mean, this can sometimes take a little bit longer, so we're just going to get us started right off the bat. So the first uncommon in the set that I have is Spatial Contortion. We're going off of just MTG Salvation. If you're looking at cards. We're just going to do each uncommon in order on that. So, Spatial Contortion is 1 colorless and 1 for an instant. Target creature gets +3/-3 until end of turn. On a scale of 0 to 5, where do you have this card, Drew?
3.5. Like 3 or 3.5.
This one's hard for me. So far in like playing the set, like I felt like if I wanted to go like into a colorless deck, that is possible for me to do. Like, I can draft a colorless deck if that's what I want. Which is kind of where I want this card. I don't like splashing this. Because it's not that great late game. So I'm gonna give it like an average Magic card. I'm actually just gonna give it a 2.5 because of its mana cost.
That's fair. I've only drafted the set once, but when I drafted it, it definitely seemed like it seems like it's incidentally pretty easy to get colorless mana.
Yeah, I think that you can like get 7 sources pretty easily if that's what you want to do, which is you want 7 sources in your deck that want Spatial Contortion because like you want to be able to like kill their 4-drop with it, right? But I don't know. It's just like I'm not ready to like give this card like this is a great removal spell that you'll play all the time thing yet.
Yeah, I think it's easier to get colorless mana than I had initially thought when I was looking at the set. Like, a lot of people had talked about waste mana being something like a 3rd color or a 6th color, but when you're drafting your 3rd color, you're drafting or whatever. But it seems to me that there's enough incidental colorless mana that you can oftentimes splash fairly easily a couple waste cards into your solid 2-color deck. So that's why I think it's like at a 3 or 3.5. This effect, when you can cast it, is obviously very powerful. It's an instant speed ability to give something -3 toughness. I tried to kill an opponent once and sealed with it, but he was cagey enough to block my large creature, so.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, like, it can definitely turn into a burn spell and unblock a guy. But I think that like the effect is like definitely in that range. My worry is like, am I casting it in a timely manner in my splash? Is kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're casting it, really late in the game, it's not going to have as powerful an effect. But usually, even if you can't cast this until turn like turn 5 or turn 6, if you can cast this and play another spell, it's still going to be really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, its mana cost being so little does tend to, so that you can't, like, casting 2 spells in a turn is huge tempo advantage, And so, like, so especially when you get to one of your spells is removing one of their permanents. So the mana cost tends to make it even more powerful. So, you know what? I think that actually is good enough for me to give it a 3. I'm going to move it up to 3.
All right, sounds good.
So the next card, I have had people talk about that they think that it's playable in sealed. The card is Warping Well. It's a colorless and 1 for an instant. You choose one, exile target creature with power or toughness 1 or less. Creature counter target sorcery target player controls, or counter target sorcery, sorry. Or put a 1/1 Eldrazi Scion token onto the battlefield. I actually think this card is a 0. I don't think you should ever be playing this card in your sealed or draft deck.
I think it's a 2 or a 2.5. I mean, I would, like, in sealed, if I have enough colorless sources, like, if I say I have, like, 5 colorless sources, I probably will always play this. I definitely don't think it's as good as Spatial Contortion, because it doesn't hit anywhere near the same number of creatures. And countering sorcery spells is really narrow and limited.
Right.
And making a 1/1 with it is obviously fairly anemic too, but it is an option. So, I mean, it's a card I'm not like necessarily like jumping for joy playing this card, but I'm not like unhappy having it in my deck.
I don't know. When I first started this format, I thought that I would be playing this card in sealed. But I don't see it. Like, after playing the format, like there is some number of like 2/1s that see play in the format. But support is so big. Like, I saw so much support going on. I don't think this card, I don't see like where it's good. Like, it's like one of those cards that's always like, yeah, I cast a Warping Whale in limited. Like, there are constructed formats that I think could exist where this card can be great. But I don't think that it's great in this limited format. So I'm going to stick with my rating. But I can't fault people for liking the card, I guess.
Yeah, it's, I mean, like I said, it's definitely not a card I'm taking high in a draft. You know, I'd much rather have any number of, you know, better creature, you know, a solid creature. But I think there's enough targets for it.
Maybe 1 is a better grade for it, because it's probably not unplayable. Like, I'd play this over other cards, like, if I needed, like, a 23rd card. But that's fair. Maybe I'll give it a 1.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not unhappy having it in my deck. I could see picking it up maybe on a wheel or something like that, you know, fairly late where I get a pack and I look at the pack and I go, okay, there's not really anything else for me. I'll take a Warping Whale. And I could see myself playing it. There's actually quite a few, like, 1-power creatures in the format as well.
Like the flyer, the 1/3 flyer, that's pretty good.
Yeah, there's that guy. There's a couple 1/4s in like black and white. There's still Benthic Infiltrator from Battle for Zendikar. You can actually kill quite a few blue creatures. You can kill like Mist Intruder, Sky Spawner.
Oh, I guess that's true. You could also kill Sentinel. That's a good point.
Yeah, so I think there's enough targets for this to be pretty good. Just, you know, obviously nowhere near as flexible in terms of just being able to flat out kill anything with 3 toughness that Spatial Contortion does. So
yeah, well, I mean, my grade could definitely change on this. Is like I play the format more. I'm gonna stick with my 1, but we'll go. I mean, and you'll give it. You said 2.5.
I'll say a 2. I think a 2.
Okay. Next up we have last uncommon in colorless. We have Walker of Wastes. This is a colorless in 4 for a 4/4. Trample. It's and then it gets +1/+1 for each waste card you control named Waste. Each land you control named Waste. Sorry. Yeah, I think this card is like totally fine. Like, it's a 4/4 for 5 at the worst. That has Trample, which is like totally reasonable. With a little bit of upside in some decks. I give it like a 2.5. I don't think it's like stellar, but I think it's like just a card that you'll put in your deck when you can cast it.
I give it a 2. I mean, if you don't have Waste, it's a 4/4 for 5, which is in today's limited format's not good enough usually, and especially because you're not casting it off of a main color. Usually you're casting it off of your waist, like we were talking about earlier. And unlike a card like Spatial Contortion, where I'm happier casting that, off of my splash, this is a card I'm not super happy casting off my splash, until I have, like, probably... I think I'm trying to think if it's 2 or 3 waste is the number you need.
Interesting. I feel like the exact opposite. I'm totally fine casting this card in my splash color with, like, 1 waste in my deck, and, like, just being able to know that, like, I can just cast it late and have, like, this 4/4/5/5 in my deck. I'm totally fine with this card in my splash color. So it's specifically because of its mana cost and being able to play it late. So it's interesting that we have different views on that.
Yeah, the problem is that the payoff just isn't that great unless you have a couple wastes. Like, if you have 2 wastes when you play this, obviously it's great. Like, 5 for a 6/6 is very powerful. So I think if you have a deck with, like, 3 wastes and you're not disrupting your other colors of mana, this guy's much better. So obviously you're going to be wanting to take him a little bit higher. But the problem is, usually when you're drafting, you have to be drafting your waste as well. So you're not really sure how many wastes am I going to have in my deck. So that's why I'm a little bit more hesitant. And just like a big generic creature, well, not even a big, like just a generic creature is not, I think, as great a payoff as like a good removal spell.
Sure. Let's go on to the first uncommon in white we have, which has caused a little bit of contention as far as like people's grading of it, how they feel like the card is in the format, and that's Allied Reinforcements. It's 3 into white for a sorcery. Put 2 white knight ally creature tokens onto the battlefield. So it's a 4-mana sorcery that provides 4 power worth of stats, 4 toughness worth of stats, split amongst 2 creatures. So it's a worse attacker and a better blocker than a 4/4.
I would give it a 3.
That's what I give it. I give it a 3. A lot of people, I had friends cutting this from sealed decks saying that 2/2s were bad in this format and that you shouldn't play this card.
No, I mean, I think I would always be happy to play this card. I mean, yeah, that's true that there are a lot of 2/3s running around, and it may be that you don't necessarily want it versus certain decks, but there's definitely points where, I don't think I'm, unhappy, like, playing this card. And sometimes you'll end up playing versus the deck that has all X2s and X1s, and you're gonna be ecstatic to have this kind of card in your deck.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's, like, situations where I would consider sideboarding it out, for sure. Like, if you're running against the mono X3 deck, or specifically 2/3 deck, not even an X3 deck, right? Like, specifically a deck with mono 2/3s, then this card gets worse, but I'm fine with giving it that 3 rating. I think that it does a great job at what it does.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much, in sealed especially, I'm always gonna start this in a white deck.
Yeah, I completely agree. Next up, we have Immolating Glare. It's 1 colorless and 1 white for an instant destroy target attacking creature. I'm pretty high on this card. I think that even in your aggressive decks, it's cheap enough that you want it. It's just good. Like, it's so cheap and it kills like things that you want to kill, things that are trying to kill you. Yeah, I'd give it a 4. Yeah, I'd give it a 4.
I'm pretty close to giving it a 4. Either a 3/5 or a 4.
Yeah, I thought about 3/5 too, but I think that it's cheap enough that I'll stick with 4.
Yeah, I mean, it's cheap enough. It's almost unconditional. Obviously, they have to be attacking you for it to happen. So again, that what I've talked about earlier, where if you're beating down, it's not very good because you're like, I need to clear this blocker out, but I can't. So it's even worse than Gideon's Reproach in that sense because you can't even like attack into them and kill the guy that's blocked. You just have to have it sit in your hand. But it's so powerful because it kills when they're attacking you. It just kills anything, and it's only 2 mana. So yeah, so I'm gonna give it a 3/5.
Sure.
Just because of the conditional clause on it. So.
Next up, we have a card that I've already thought was an isolation zone in my sealed pool. For some reason, that's Iona's Blessing. It's 3 and a white. It's an enchantment. It's enchant creature. And then it gives a enchanted creature +2 and vigilance, and can block an additional creature. So I don't like this card. I feel like 4 mana is a lot to ask of me to put myself in a position to get 2 for 1. I mean, like, they could just cast an Immolating Glare on my guy, and that seems bad.
Yeah.
Or a Spatial Contortion when I targeted, or a Grasp of Darkness. Like,
yeah, I mean, obviously there's a ton of things I mean, it's the classic problem with creature enchantments. Anything can go wrong when you enchant your creature. I would give it like a 1.5. The reason being that there are going to be some decks that this is actually going to be very good versus. The fact that it gives your guy vigilance, like say you're playing versus some sort of, beatdown deck that doesn't really have unconditional removal spells, you can just slap this on a guy and start smashing for a lot, and they can't really attack you back, and so you could have a creature that dominates the board. But obviously the classic problem is that, if your guy gets isolation zoned or oblivion striked or, any number of things that end up happening to it, that you're just going to be in a bad spot.
I'm gonna say that, like, I'm gonna just, the only time I'm playing this card is probably out of the board. I don't see myself ever starting this card.
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of card that I think, is better in your sideboard to board in versus an aggressive deck than just starting it out. If you have to start it, your deck's probably struggling, so.
Right. Let's go on to the next uncommon. We have Make a Stand. This card has been cast against me 3 times already. It's 3 and a white for an instant. Creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain indestructible until end of turn.
2 and a white, right?
Yes. 2 and a white, sorry.
So how are your experiences since I've had no one cast it versus me, so I have no idea.
So one time they did it to save their guy, and nothing happened to my guy. One time it was a blowout, and one time it didn't matter because, like, I mean, they did it to attack me with a bunch of guys, and then I took 3 extra damage, and it didn't really matter. I was gonna lose that game anyway. You were really far ahead.
All right, so win more, lose more, and a blowout.
Yeah, it was all varying experiences. I think the one where you're like casting it to save your guy is interesting. I like the win more one the most, actually, because I think that there are situations where it turns into a blowout more than it turns into a win more. I don't ever like this. It's kind of hard. Like, I was a pretty big fan of the white card in Battle for Zendikar that was white for +2/+0 or +2/+1. What is the name of the card?
Inspired Charge?
Yeah, Inspired Charge. Like, I thought that card was pretty good in, like, the majority of the red-white decks I was playing. So I can see this card being okay. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean the card I was thinking of was Trumpet Blast, because it's the same mana cost, and it's a similar effect, but you obviously don't get indestructible. So the question you have to ask is this card better or worse than Trumpet Blast?
Well, Trumpet Blast is probably better at the job that Trumpet Blast wants to do, right?
Yeah, so I mean, generally it's like if you can get 2 guys or 3 guys through and you can do 4 to 6 damage with your 3 mana red spell, it's really good. This obviously will never do that much damage. If you have that many unblocked creatures, you're probably winning anyways. I guess the question is whether the indestructible matters. So it's slightly easier to cast an Inspired Charge too. It also, the other thing with Inspired Charge is your opponent can do things to muck it up with, like, say, combat tricks of their own. This just basically blanks any opposing combat tricks to, try and kill their guys in combat. So I would probably give it a 1.5. It's not a card like in Draft I'm really going to take very high, and in Sealed I'm only ever going to play it in really, really, really specific kinds of decks. So it's probably a card I'm not really looking to take high, and it's not a card I'm really looking to start in a Sealed deck. for the most part, and I probably honestly wouldn't cite it in very often. But I mean, there are some decks that may want this kind of effect.
Yeah, I think that it's so deck specific that I'm going to join you at a 1.5. Like, there are decks that will want this card, but don't just jam it in every white deck thinking that it's like some sweet combat trick, because I don't think that's what it is. Like, I think you want to specifically be in a racing situation to use this card, or you want to be creating a racing situation to use this card.
Right. I mean, either a racing situation or like a really big board stall, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because,
both situations. Yep.
Yeah, because it is an instant. You can possibly set up where it's really late, and you like both players have like 5 creatures in play each, and you get in some really big nasty combat, and then you're able to like kill a bunch of their creatures with this card. But obviously, that's a really narrow kind of situation that comes up.
Yeah. Well, let's go on to Relief Captain. This is what some people say this is the best white uncommon. It's white 2 for a 3/2 core Knight ally. When it enters the battlefield, support 3.
Yeah, I mean this is probably a 4. I got to play a little bit with support in the one draft deck I had, and I was really impressed with support a lot. I didn't have Relief Captain, but the effect this guy has for his mana cost. I mean, 4 for a 3/2 is a reasonable rate. It's not a great rate, obviously, because usually you're expecting like a Hill Giant at those stats, but the fact that you also get 3 additional counters, so if you can get 3 creatures with it. Now, getting 3 creatures on turn 4 is pretty unlikely, right? Because you would have to have a 1-drop, a 2-drop, and a 3-drop, and I usually don't play 1-drops in my limited decks. Usually you'll have a number of 2-drops and a number of 3-drops, but even if you only can get 2 creatures with this, like, that's still pretty good. I mean, it's like a creature that gave you like a travel preparations, so
Right.
you're not losing any tempo in terms of playing an additional creature.
Yeah, I mean, some amount of the power and toughness on this card comes in with haste, and it's like a 5. It's like a 5/4, right? Like,
right on turn 4. And obviously, if you're later in the game, turn 6 or 7, which that happens in limited, where you don't cast everything in your hand. Obviously, you play this, you get to play it on, say, a flyer, and then a ground creature that can now start attacking because it's slightly bigger, and then one other guy. Yeah, I think this guy is a white creature that I'm pretty much always happy to have in my decks.
sure. I'm going to join you at a 4. I had this in my sealed deck at the PPTQ this weekend, which, by the way, if listeners, and Drew's one draft was a PPTQ top 8 draft that he won.
Yes.
But I mean, the card was great. Like, there was a game where I top decked it, like with 0 creatures in play. And I was like, oh, well, this sucks. And then I cast it because like.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's still an okay body. I mean,
Yeah,
a 3/2/4 is not, like I said, it's not the greatest rate, but it's not like it's a 1/2/4, right? So.
Right. The next card we have is Step Glider. Oh, by the way, did I give that rating? I'm gonna give it a 4 if I didn't.
Yep, I gave it a 4 as well.
Next up we have Step Glider. This is 4 and a white for a 2/4 flying vigilant elemental. It also has an activated ability of 1 and a white. You can give a +1/+1 counter and flying to target. You can target creature with a +1/+1 counter. Sorry, gains flying and vigilance until end of turn. I also had this in my sealed deck. I only had 2 support cards, so the ability didn't come up a ton. But actually, this card is freaking great. I love this card. It was like very good for me. Oftentimes, I was casting it instead of other 5-drops in my hand, and I was surprised by that. It like cleans up the board pretty nicely and is a pretty good beater. And then if you have other support things, it's just insane. I actually would give this card a 3.5.
Yeah, I was thinking a 3.5 as well. It's slightly overcosted for its stats, right? Like, it's 1 more mana than you would maybe want to pay for a 2/4 flyer. It does have vigilance, which is nice. So, it can attack and also still hold down little ground creatures. And then the ability itself, the ability to give creatures +1/+1 with +1/+1 counters flying.
And vigilance also.
And vigilance, yeah, lets you break through board stalls, pretty quickly. So yeah, I think this is a white uncommon you're pretty happy to have in any of your white decks.
I found that it was good when I was ahead, behind, and at parity, and those are the kind of cards that I want in my deck.
Yep, absolutely.
Next up we have Stoneforge Acolyte. This is a 1-drop. It's 1 white for a core artificer ally. You can pay it's a 1/2. And you can cohort, so you can tap it and an untapped ally you control. To look at the top 4 cards of your library, you may reveal an equipment card from among them, and put that card into your hand. Put the rest of the cards on the bottom of your library in any order. I don't actually know the number of equipment I would need to play this card, but it's a number that I don't even want to play.
Yeah, I would give this a 0.5.
Yeah, if I had 5 Captain's Claws in my deck, somehow I would play this card 100% of the time.
Honestly, I don't even care about the text. I don't even care because the text doesn't really matter. The only thing I would consider this is if I'm playing versus some way aggressive red beatdown deck with a million 2/1s, then I would maybe side this in as a really cheap blocker.
I wouldn't even side it in then.
I mean,
I guess if my deck had no 2-drops in it, maybe I would sideboard it then. I do think that if I had 5 Captain's Claws, I would play this card though.
That honestly is the only reason I would play it is, like I said, if I was playing versus some really aggressive deck with a ton of X1s in it, and I really just wanted a really cheap blocker, then I would board it in, but it's a really narrow circumstance that I would be doing that.
I'm gonna give it a 0.
Alright.
Wall of Resurgence is next. This card is 2 and a white for an 0/6 wall defender. And then when it enters the battlefield, you may put 3+1/+1 counters on target land you control. If you do, that land becomes a 0/0 elemental and is still a land. I actually think this card is great. I've gotten the chance to play with it already. People are like, oh, it's overrated, and that could be true. It's probably not a 5, but it's still really, really, really good. There have been times where I actually didn't animate the land because but I think that this format actually just has enough. We were playing an 0/6 in the last format for 3. I don't understand why this card is bad because it's an 0/6. We were already playing that card sometimes.
Yeah,
why does this card get beef for being a card we were already playing?
I think because what happened is that people overrated it, right? So people were like, oh, this card is amazing, it's insane. And they were even saying, it's insane and constructed. And then everyone's like, whoa, calm down. There's a drawback to putting counters, making your land a creature, right? I mean, you can't use that for mana if you're attacking with it. If it gets killed, you lose a land. Obviously there's drawbacks with making your land a creature, but yeah, I had this in my draft deck, and I was actually super impressed with the 0/6 itself. Yeah. And my opponent played it versus me, won a game, and I even I was able to play a Grip of Desolation and kill his land and his best creature, but he still had an 0/6 in play, which actually was blocking, straight up hey, I'm still gonna block your giant ground creature.
Yeah.
And I was that's pretty good, so.
Yeah. I actually give this card a 3.5. I think that the upside to this card is tremendous. There's an inherent risk to that upside, but I still I don't know that I would ever cut this card.
No, I would never ever cut this card. I would always play it in my white deck. I would take it pretty high in my draft decks too. Yeah, when it's a 2-for-1, it's a 2-for-1, and it's a powerful 2-for-1 at the mana cost. Yes, you're exposing your land. There's a little bit of risk to that, but
it's so funny because it's so funny because with the cards with Awaken, we were pure upside, and then this one awakens for free, and people are pure downside.
I think
you can't have it both ways, bro.
I think what you have to do is you have to compare Awakening on turn 3 to Awakening on say turn 6, right? Because if you awaken on turn 6, if they kill your land, it's a bummer, but it's not really going to stunt your development. If you awaken on turn 3 and they kill your land, not only did you lose your creature, air quotes here, you also you got stone rained.
Right.
And getting Stone Rained on turn 3 is much more devastating than getting Stone Rained on turn 7.
Right. There's definitely an inherent risk, but I'd say that like the reward of this card is also really high.
I mean, the other thing too is you can always just wait to play this, right?
Right. You don't have to play it on turn.
Yeah, I mean, you can continue to play your game, and then on turn 6 you can be like, oh, I'm going to play a 3-drop MI Wall of Resurgence, and now all of a sudden, if they kill your land, like, all right, good job, I still got an 0/6 and whatever else I cast. So
right, and even like let's say that you play it on like there are also turns where like you play, like late game. This is like late game. Legitimately, this is a 3/9, right? With 3/3 of it being hasted and like on another creature. Like this is why you would always play that card.
Yeah, I think it's a 3.5, close to a 4.
Yeah, I think the risk makes it. I think the risk is what makes it that 3.5.
Right.
But you also can note like you can just play it and not animate the land on turn 3 if like you need an 0/6.
Yeah, that I'm much sadder about.
I mean, yeah, but you were already playing an 0/6 in the last format.
Yeah, so I gave it a 3.5, pretty close to a 4, I think.
Yeah.
So
next up we have we're going to move on to blue, and we actually have one of my favorite cards in the set. This is Cyclone Sire. It's 4 and a blue for a 3/4 flying elemental, and when it dies, you may put 3/1 counters on target land.
Yeah, back to making 3/3 lands. Yeah, this is also a 3.5 for me.
Yeah, I am the same. Like I haven't passed one in draft yet. I've done about 3 or 4 drafts. I think 4 drafts. Yeah, I've done 4 drafts. One of them, did I play blue? Did I not play blue in any of them? I can't remember. I feel like I've never passed this card. I might have taken an Isolation Zone over one, actually. But I think the card is great, and I'm going to join you at a 3.5. This one doesn't have that inherent downside, because like by the time this creature's dying, you typically are okay turning your land into a 3/3.
Yep.
But I think the card is great. Like 3/4 flyers are humongoid, and this one turns into a 2-for-1 later, so I'm totally okay with this card.
Yep,
I could see this card turning into a 4 in specific formats, maybe even this one eventually.
Yeah, I think this is a great blue uncommon. You're pretty happy first picking this if you don't have any other options in the pack or any other options near the power level. But yeah, definitely starting this always in sealed in any blue deck. So
next up we have Gift of Tusks. This is 1 blue for an instant. Until end of turn, target creature loses all abilities and becomes a green elephant with base power 3/3. I've seen people say this is like in their top 3 uncommons in blue. I don't see that at all.
No.
I don't even know that I would cast this card.
I give it like a 1. I could see playing this like, say you're some blue deck or like say you're a blue-green deck and you don't have a way to kill a giant Eldrazi, right? So you're like,
sure.
I don't have a way to kill some gigantic creature. I really need a way to do that.
So you're going to turn it into a 3/3 and gang block it.
Yep, pretty much.
Because a 3/3 is still like a formidable thing.
Yeah, I mean it's not a good answer. I'm not saying this is like elegant or good in any way, but sometimes you have decks where you're like, I can't kill a gigantic creature.
That was my sealed deck at the PPTQ. I had 0 ways to kill anything with 5 toughness or more.
And mine was the
I didn't like if I had 5 creatures out, I had an outnumber in my deck, but that didn't seem likely.
I was the complete opposite. I had 2 isolation zones, a stasis snare.
But this is why you top 8'd and I lost my winning in, right? Like
I can't remember what else I had. But yeah, I was like, I am not hurting for ways to remove creatures from the game. But yeah, back to Gift of Tusks. Like I said, I'm not saying it's a good solution to a giant Eldrazi, but
it's one.
Sometimes you have to do what you got to do. But yeah,
I'll join you. I'll join you at a 1. I agree.
In terms of normal limited games, I don't like this card at all. Yeah, because like in a normal limited game, it's like, okay, I played a 2/2, I played a 3/2, I played a 3/3, I played a 4/4, and your plan is to turn one of my guys into a 3/3. Like, I don't understand what that does. Or to turn one of your guys into a 3/3. Like, all right.
Yeah, I don't like this card at all. I'll join you at a 1. Like, I think that the situation you described is basically the only situation where you want it. Next up, we have Grip of the Royal. This is 2 and a blue for an instant. It's got Surge, which is you may cast the spell for its search cost if you cast another spell this turn. Its search cost is a blue and 1. That's a blue and 1 generic. And then you can tap target creature. It doesn't untap during its controller's deck. Untap step, and draw a card. This is Crippling Chill. We played this card before. I give this card like a 2.5. I think it's totally reasonable. Also, Surge is better than I thought it was. So yeah, I think this card is fine.
Yeah, 2 or 2.5. I'm not always gonna want it in certain decks, but the decks that do want it, it's pretty decent. It was actually funny when I was flipping through my sealed deck, to construct it. I thought it was Into the Royal. I was like, oh, did they reprint Into the Royal? And I was like, oh, this is not quite Into the Royal, but, you know, it's still a decent card, so.
Into the Royal is a sweet magic card.
Yeah, much better than Grip of the Royal.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of decks that are, you know, plenty happy playing Grip of the Royal, so.
Yeah. Next up we have a card that, I have now heard is constructed and limited playable, and I think that it's just bad, and maybe only be a sideboard card in any situation you ever want the card. That's Prophet of Distortion. It's 1 blue for a 1/2 Eldrazi drone, devoid. You can pay a colorless and 3 generic to draw a card. I don't know what deck actually wants this. Like, I've heard people say that like their control decks in both limited and constructed want this card, and like this. So like the main comparison that people have is Azure Mage, right? They're like, oh, it's like a 1 mana Azure Mage. I'm like, well, Azure Mage is a 2/1, right? Like that's a real card. This is a 1/2. This is not a real card. So you're playing a very, 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 very fragile 1 mana enchantment, right? So it can't attack or block, because that's not something it can do. Like, let's not pretend that it can. I guess it could, like, block a 2/1 if, like... I mean, if this card is blocking for, like, a 2/1, like, this card got way more equity out of it than I would ever expect you to get out of it. But I don't think that I even want this in my control-y blue deck in limited, or definitely not in constructed.
So I agree with you in constructed. It's not a good card in constructed. I don't understand why people would think this would be a good card in constructed. In limited, I actually think it's pretty good when you can activate waste mana. So.
I want it to be good. Don't get me wrong. I love drawing cards. It's just like this takes up a card in my deck.
I actually talked to a friend in Indiana who, because I know Aaron Marinaka said he really liked this card a lot, and he played it in his sealed deck, and he actually said he was really happy with it. At any point when the game starts to get locked up a little bit, if you can have a repeatable source of card draw, it's pretty powerful. Yeah, it's not quite as good as Azure Mage. I agree with you there, because obviously just a 2/1 for 2 without any text on it is it's decent enough for you to want to play, and a 1/2 for 1 is not anywhere near as good. But the fact that if you're in any sort of board stall, you can start gaining some amount of card advantage, I think is pretty good. So I actually like this card. I think it's like a 2.5. You obviously have to be able to activate it, because if you can't activate it, then it's just chaff. But yeah, I like it. I think it's pretty good and limited. I would be looking to use it when I can. So
I think it's like, if it is playable, like it's in a very specific slow grindy deck and limited, like a blue-black devoid flyers deck kind of deck, like pretty slow deck. I'll give it like a 1. I'll give it a 1.5. Like I think that like the people that are talking about it the most are people like you and me who really like this type of stuff, where we want to do this. And so the situations where it's good, it's like pretty good in those situations, right? But like, you just have, like, let's say you were starting this card in limited, there are so many matchups where you have to side it out, I feel like.
I mean, the thing is, like back to talking about, you know, when you're playing versus an aggressive deck, a lot of times those aggressive decks have a lot of 2/1s and stuff. Sure. I mean, not always, but if they have a lot of 2/1s, this still blocks them. I mean,
right, but that's fine, but like top decking this card late against those decks, like is just like gaining 2 life, right? And that's not good enough.
Well, I mean, but if you can top deck it in a situation, say you get to like a board parity, because sometimes what happens, and this happens in Constructed too, is if you make your deck too fast as the control deck, and what I mean by that is like if your answers are too fast and you don't have a way to pull ahead in the card advantage department, sometimes the aggro deck can actually grind you out. And so I like the fact that this card not only blocks early, but late you can like draw it, play it, and then draw a card as on its way out or whatever.
Okay.
I mean, obviously it's not like a, windmill slam like, oh yeah, I'm going to win the game now because I drew this or whatever, but it does give you something to do in the late game, even versus those aggressive decks, which does happen. Like, you're going to have, I had a guy in the red-white deck play Scour from Existence on one of my cards. Like, it happens. You get to the late game, you're going to get to those situations, and anything you can have to give you an advantage in the late game, like Prophet of Distortion, gives you a much better chance to win that game, so.
Sure. I'm going to give this card, I'm going to actually go back down. I'm going to stick at a 1. So you said 2.5?
Yeah, 2.5.
Okay. Well, the next card, we can talk about how awesome it is, because it's, like, super sweet. So, and I think we'll agree on that, and that's Rolling Waters. It's got the greatest mana cost, 5 blue, for a sorcery.
Is that the greatest mana cost?
It's one that when you cast it, you're like, I can't believe I'm doing this. That's return up to 2 target creatures to opponent's control to their owner's hands. Why can't it just be 2 creatures? I'm paying 7 mana. If I want to bounce my own guy, let me do it. Target player draws 2 cards. Wait a second. Why can I target my opponent to draw 2 cards, but I can't target my own guy?
It's probably too powerful at that point.
I think this card is super sweet.
Yeah, this card's pretty good. I give it like a 3-5. Maybe.
Oh, you have it way higher than I do. I think that the mana cost gets me at it. I mean, it's not way higher. I give it like a 3. I think it's like above your average Magic card. There's a deck building cost to put a 7 mana blue sorcery in your deck.
Right.
That deck cost is having a sweet deck. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I was gonna say when I said I was gonna give it a 3-5, I would say 3-5 edging towards a 3, not edging towards a 4.
Sure.
Yeah, because 7 mana is a lot, but the effect is really powerful. And when you're looking to get a little bit of card advantage off your cards, it's nice that you can like kind of make sure you're also not getting your face smashed in by their 2 biggest creatures. So.
Yeah, I think that like one thing to think about with this card, and like this is literally a situation I saw happen, is they're like, okay, so he might like some guy one turn he casts a rune processor, and then the next turn he casts what's the 8-drop called? Eldrazi Devastator, right?
Okay.
And he's like, and then the guy bounced both of them and attacked him, and then he could only play 1 spell next turn. And he drew 2 cards. Like, he was so far ahead, like, because you can't play like, you're not living in a world where you can play Rune Processor and Eldrazi Devastator at once. So it was quite good in that situation, and I think that, like, that's not even, like, the best case scenario. Like, if you can bounce your opponent's Eldrazi Devastator and, like, their 4-drop, like, that's good enough.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, at that point in the game, that effect tends to be pretty good. So, yeah, and the fact that you're also drawing cards, yeah, I like this effect a lot. I like drawing cards. I like bouncing creatures. So, yeah, I think this is a pretty good blue card.
Yeah. Next up, we have one of my favorite uncommons in the set, and that's Thought Harvester. That's 3 and a blue for a 2/4 Eldrazi drone. It's devoid. It's got flying. Whenever you cast a colorless spell, target opponent puts the card of his library. Exiles the top card of his or her library. This card is fantastic. It's I have it like pretty high up there as far as blue uncommons. It's probably it might be my number 1 even. I'm not sure.
More than Cyclone Sire?
Yeah, I mean like those are my top 2 for sure. I like this card a lot. I give it a 3.5.
I gave it a 3. Basically it's just a 2/4 flyer for 4. You do have the exile effect. I don't think that matters as much in Double Oath of the Gatewatch.
I did have my first draft deck featured this card, and some processors. So and the thing is I think that so when you think about like the processors that you're getting the chance to get, right? So at common, like we have Rune Processor, which you only get one shot at, right, in that pack, and then there are like other common processors, like I played an Oracle of Dusk and Mercstrider, right? So those are also commons that you get the shot at. I had a Mercstrider in my deck with this card, and this card did so much work in that draft. I don't actually think it's as hard to get a processor as people think it is.
Sure, I'm not saying you won't get processors, but it's not as key as
Sure.
Triple Battle for Zendikar. So yeah, to me, I'm basically just drafting a 2/4 flyer for 4, which is a very good blue card.
I had somebody ask me like, how good is a 2/4 flyer? And this is an interesting point. First of all, it is a creature that blocks Ghostly Sentinel out of their third pack, right? And that wasn't true of most flyers in the set before, which is what made Ghostly Sentinel like super powerful. And also the other comparison I gave them is like, how good was Courier Griffin for you?
Yeah, I mean in really simple limited terms, this thing blocks 3/3s, right? They play a 3/3, you play a 2/4 flyer, you can block it.
Right, and so like they play a Hill Giant, they can't attack with their Hill Giant, and you can attack with this if you want. Like if you play a 5-drop that can also block that Hill Giant, this thing becomes a free attacker, and otherwise it stops their Hill Giant. And so in those simplest terms, I think this card is I mean, this is what I like to do in Limited. This is like it's simple and elegant, I guess. I don't know how to like, it's so simple and that it's beautiful. Like, I like this card a lot. So I'm gonna stick it at 3.5. You said a 3, right?
Yep.
All right, we have 2 more uncommons in blue. The next one we have is Unity of Purpose. It's 3 in a blue for an instant support 2. Untap each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it. I've heard people say that this is also in their top 3 uncommons. What do you think?
I don't know who you're drafting with, but
this is the interwebs. The people that I'm drafting with think this card is fine.
Yeah, because I definitely like the flyers we've talked about.
Way better.
Much more than this card.
Yeah.
This card for me gets like a 1.
Yeah, I haven't actually wanted this in my deck yet. Support's better than I thought it would be, so I'm willing to try it out.
The thing about support is I like support when I get something else with it, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I like getting, like, it's the classic example of like life gain. It's why Lightning Helix is such a good card and why Healing Salve is such a bad card, because when I get the effect on top of something I would probably be doing anyways, it's really good. So when I get the effect by itself, I don't really like it very much.
So what do you think of Shoulder to Shoulder, the white common?
I like that one a lot because it cantrips, right? You know, it replaces itself. So it's like getting, if you get the effect, if you get 2 counters, it's almost like, you know, it's like a travel preparations, but you draw a card.
I think that the situations that people are having where they think this card is good is a pretty easy trap to fall into. Nobody knows Unity of Purpose exists, right? So they like attack into your 4 open blue mana, and they're like, and you're like, okay, Unity of Purpose blow you out, and they're like, oh, well, that was insane.
I actually had that happen where it wasn't quite a blowout. I only lost like 1 creature because of it, where I wasn't cognizant of this card and I did attack into it and he did play it. But as soon as he did that, and this was game 1, after that I'm like, okay, so he has Unity of Purpose. Like, now I just need to make sure, you know, what happens.
Considering it.
Yeah, what happens when he has this card from now on.
And this is a trap that people fall into pretty early in Limited, and that's why I wanted to mention that people think this card is great. Because for Drew and I, we know that tricks like this, like, here, there's a huge difference between this and the green common Vines of the Recluse, right? So Vines of the Recluse that's 1 mana, right? Like, it's pretty easy and non-intrusive to leave up 1 green mana, right?
Right.
Like, that's just gonna happen so much. You can't play around them having binds every time they leave up a green mana. That would be insane. You just can't do that. Whereas, like, if they're leaving up 4 mana, like, this is a card you can think about. And so, for that reason, like, this card loses equity as the draft format goes on because you're going to get less and less people with it. And the upside of this card is getting people.
Yeah, it's way too expensive for its cost. If it was like 2 mana, it would be a lot higher.
I mean, this card would be like probably my favorite card in the set.
Yeah, but four mana for that effect is just way too high.
Yeah.
So.
What did you say you wanted to give it?
I gave it like a 1.
I'm gonna start it at a 1.5 and say that it can lose equity pretty fast. Like, it could get. I think this card could get to like, you shouldn't be playing it.
Yeah, this is not a card. I'm not looking to start it in a sealed deck, and I'm not looking to draft it very high, so.
Sure. Next up we have Void Shatter. This is a counter spell. It's an instant for blue 1. It's devoid. Counter target spell. If it was countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. There is the beautiful conversation of calling this card a bad, what is the card called? Spell Shrivel. People are like, oh, this is a bad Spell Shrivel. And I'm like, well.
I mean, it's colorless Dissipate, right?
Yeah.
So, I give it a 2.
I give it a 2 as well. I think that, like, people thought Spell Shrivel was, like, a 3, and, like, they thought it was really good, and it was fine. I think this card is better than Spell Shrivel, and if I had the choice between both, if I can pay blue, I'm gonna play over Spell Shrivel, all the time.
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's not really that huge of a difference between Spell Shrivel and Void Shatter. There are some games where, like, I was actually able to, quote unquote, play around Spell Shrivel. I mean, I'm using air quotes here, but, and obviously Void Shatter just, no questions asked, just deals with whatever they're doing. But yeah, I really like counterspells a lot in sealed. I'm always happy to play like a cancel usually in my blue decks in sealed. In limited, they go down a lot, or in draft, sorry, they go down a lot in value. So yeah, I give it a 2. You're not always going to play it, but you're not necessarily unhappy to have this in your deck.
Next up we have Essence Depleter, so we're going to our first black card. This is a 2/3 for a black and 2 generic. By the way, everybody, if you're having trouble following along because like you're using like maybe the Wizard spoiler, we are using like MTG Salvation is what I'm using to go in order for these cards. So the Wizards organizes these cards differently than this is being organized. So just make sure that like you're using a site that just puts them in alphabetical order rather than like devoid, non-devoid kind of order. So, but Essence Depleter is, like I said, it's an Eldrazi drone. It's a 2/3 for 3, 3 of it being, black and 2 generic. And then it's devoid, and it's got an activated ability of 1 colorless and 1 generic. Target opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. So this card's insane. If there's one thing that I learned from this set, that this is in the running for like the most annoying card to play against.
Yeah, I think it's like a 3. I'll always play it in my black decks.
I think that the decks that like can activate this ability more than once a turn, this card becomes like pretty freaking good. Like if you're ever in a position where you're in a board stall, this card just pulls you so far ahead. It's like got a fine rate. Like we've all played a Minotaur before, right? Like that's just something we do. I'm going to give it a 3.5 to start with. I think this card is really, really good.
Yeah, I played against it a couple times on Saturday. The effect was okay. Obviously, it's pretty good. And like you said, once you can start using it multiple times is when it gets really powerful. But there's maybe not enough times when you're able to use it multiple times, and so you're only able to get like 1 activation out of it, and then it's fine. It's just not super exciting.
Sure.
But yeah, it's like a 3. I mean, like I said, I'm always gonna play it in my black decks, but if I open it in like in my pack for, say, first pick in a draft, I'm definitely looking for something a little bit stronger than that. So
that's fair. I guess that like my experience against it is specifically only in sealed, where like he definitely opened the cards to maximize it, and there's a certain draft cost to playing this card, which is a good point. I'm going to stick with where I'm at with it, but I could definitely see it dropping down a little bit. Next we have Flaying Tendrils. It's black 1 for a sorcery devoid. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. If a creature would die this turn, exile it instead. So in your mono 2/3 deck in black, which there's a ton of 2/3s and 3/3s in black, 2/4s, 4/3s, like there's a ton of cards in black that you would play this. I mean, I'm totally fine starting this card, I guess is what I'm getting at. I think that sometimes it just like kills one of your opponent's guys. Sometimes it kills 3 of your opponent's guys, 1 of your guys. Like, I'm fine playing this card. In some situations, there are decks that I would start this in. That being said, I still have it as like a 2.
Yeah, 2, probably 2 or 2.5.
Yeah, it's closer to a 2.5 than a 1.5 for sure for me.
Yeah, I mean it's like you said, I'm probably gonna play it. I'm never gonna like really cut it. It's really funny to me because like we're talking about this card and it's like, wow, this card isn't that great. And there's, I mean, it's not like stellar, right? You're never like, oh wow, yeah, I got Flaying Tendrils.
I got Flaying Tendrils in my Winning, and it was insane for him.
I mean, sometimes that can happen, right? Sometimes it will be a blowout, but then a lot of times it'll just kind of be like, yeah, maybe I'll kill one thing.
Right.
But
which people don't realize is like part of this card. Like, it's okay for this card to be a 1-for-1.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you're like, well, I gotta kill that one. I mean, it kills like a Sky Spawner, right? Like if they play a Sky Spawner, you just play that and you're like, alright, that's not bad. I mean, I tar snared a couple, of the 2/1 flyer part of Sky Spawners, so they still got the token out of the effect. This just sweeps up the token too.
Right. So, let's move on to Grasp of Darkness. This is black for an instant. It's a reprint. I believe it was a common before. Its target creature gets -4/-4 until end of turn. This is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean it's very close to a 4, if not just spot on the nose 4, right? I mean it's a very powerful removal spell. You do have to have double black.
Yeah, and like let's be clear here, this kills an attacking or blocking 5/5 just about 100% of the time.
Yep, yeah, it does do that as well. But I mean it kills like
a 6/6. It kills a lot of things.
Yeah, but I mean even just unconditionally it kills. I mean there's yes, they occasionally have an Eldrazi in their deck, but this kills almost every other creature in their deck. So
yeah, like just looking at some of the rares, for example, like in black, it doesn't kill the first 2, but it kills the 3rd rare creature in this set. So it kills 1 black rare creature. It kills 1, 2. I mean, it kills a lot of rare creatures. Like, it kills a lot of their bombs. Like, it kills dragons. Like, if they have a dragon in their deck, usually it's around like a 4/4, and this will kill it. Like, that's a pretty big. If it kills angels. It kills tons of things. It kills tons of things.
Yep.
Tons.
Yeah. Yep. So take this high. Be happy with it in your black deck.
Yeah. So you gonna give it a 4?
Yeah, I'll give it a 4.
I'll join you. I think that this is the best black uncommon. So.
Yeah, I haven't looked at. Can't remember quite all of them, but I'm not. Yeah. Best black uncommon. We'll go with that.
And if we change our minds in 10 minutes, fine.
Yeah, it's fine. No, I agree. It's pretty easy to see this being the best black uncommon.
Next up we have Havoc Soar. It's an Eldrazi drone. It's devoid. It costs 3 generic and 1 black. It's a 3/3, and you can activate it for a colorless and 1 to give the creature +2/+1 until end of turn. It's a hill giant with upside, and I think that it's fine. I give it like a 2.5.
Yeah, 2.5, maybe a 2. Just because,
yeah, it's on a low line with 2.5s.
Yeah, I mean, like if you don't have waste mana, it's a
hill giant.
Yeah, and sometimes you cut hill giants, so
sometimes you got hill giants.
Yeah, I mean it is what it is. So yeah, I'd say 2 or a 2.5.
Next up we have Malakir Soothsayer. This card is 4 and a black for a Vampire Shaman ally. It's a 4/4, so it's a 5 and a 4/4. Reasonable there. You can tap it to you can tap an untapped ally you control, so you can cohort to draw a card and lose a life. I think this card is pretty good. I give it's fine. Like, I think that the cost of having an ally in your deck, another ally, is basically 0. Like, there are so many allies in this set.
Yeah, there's quite a few more allies than Battle for Zendikar, especially I think in these colors. So yeah, I like this a lot. I think a 3 is where I would rate this.
I could see myself like second picking this card. I don't know if it's good enough that I can see myself first picking it yet, but I could see myself like picking it, like this being the best card in a pack pretty early in the pack. So I'll join you at a 3.
Yep.
Next up we have Null Caller. It's 3 and a black for a 2/4 Vampire Shaman. You can pay 4 mana, 3 generic and a black, exile a creature from your graveyard, put a 2/2 zombie onto the battlefield. See, this is what I want in that black-blue deck we talked about over Prophet of Distortion. Like, this is something that I can get on board with.
All right, yeah, I can kind of see that. It's just a question of like how good are 2/2s at that stage in the game. I actually had one in. I had the option of playing it in my draft deck on Saturday, and it just ended up getting cut. I just didn't feel like I was ever going to really be able to activate the ability.
Interesting.
I had a lot of other things going on in the deck, so yeah, so it just sat in my sideboard. I still would like not be unhappy playing this in my black deck, so I think it's like a 2.5 or a 3.
Yeah, I give this card a 3. No, I can't do that. Like, I want to give it a 3, and I know that I'm overrating it, so I'm gonna go with a 2.5. Like, I think that like it's not a 2/4 for 4 is like this awkward card that sometimes you like begrudgingly play. You're like, I really need another creature, and like I guess I'll play this one. But I think that like there are times where this activated ability is also just really good. So I'm gonna stick with a 2.5. I'm not gonna stick with it. I'm gonna go to it. I'm gonna bring myself down. Next up, we have a card that I think is interesting, and that's Reaver Drone. It's 1 black for a 2/1 Eldrazi drone. It's devoid. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you don't have another colorless creature, you lose a life. I saw a sealed deck that it was 100% correct to play this card in. He had 2 of them, and he had the nut red black deck. And I was like, oh, well, you're 100% supposed to play these. And I didn't think that would ever be true in sealed.
Yeah, in a normal black deck, I definitely would not want to play this in sealed. In draft, I'm a little bit happier.
But
well,
you wouldn't take it highly, right? Like, this is
still... No, it's like a 2.
Oh, I don't even know that I have that high. Like, it has to be like this super aggressive black deck that here's my biggest problem with it. Is that, like, I want this in a deck with Swarm Surge. But I don't know if I'm gonna get Swarm Surge.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like a 2, you know, you'll play it sometimes, and then a lot of times you'll be like, yeah, you can chill on my sideboard.
Yeah, I have it as a 1.5. But, like, in the decks, like, in Swarm Surge decks, like, if you're gonna go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop Swarm Surge, it's like, oh my gosh, I actually just can't win this game.
Yeah.
So, next up we have we go quite a bit down for Visions of Brutality. This is 1 black and 1 for an enchantment devoid enchant creature. Enchanted creature can't block, and then whenever it deals damage, its controller loses that much life.
I'm still not really sure. I've actually played versus this card a couple times, and I had the option to take it in a pack, but I didn't. I'm still not sure how to feel about this card. It
removes it until they Alpha Strike you. Like, that's...
Well, that's not even necessarily true. I had someone play it on me in the pre-release, but it was like on a 2-power guy, and I just kept attacking with my guy, because I was like ahead, so I was like willing to trade 2 life with him, you know.
That's the thing is, like, what happens when they just block it? Like, then, I don't know. I'm with you. I don't know how to feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously insane in an aggressive deck, right? Because you're just like, all right, best blocker, get out of here. And even if you want to attack back, get ready to take a bunch of damage. But in any sort of like middling deck, it's a little bit more like, all right, I made it so you can't block, so I can attack past you. But maybe you attack back. Maybe I'm not far enough ahead in the life race.
Right.
It's probably a 2/5. For me, and it may even be better than that. It may actually be like, it may come that, in, a couple weeks we're like, all right, Visions of Brutality is very strong.
Sure.
But for me right now, I haven't played with it. I mean, it's funny because like I said, I think I played versus it 3 times or something, and I had an option to take it, and I'm still just kind of like, I don't know how to feel about the card.
Yeah. I think for me so far, I'm going to start it at a 2. And then say that, like what you said, that it has the potential to go up quite a bit. Like, if it's like 2 mana kill your guy, it's really good, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's a good Magic card.
Yeah,
I don't
absolutely.
know if that's what it is, and so I'm going to start it at a 2.
Alright.
Let's move on to red. Our first red uncommon is Embodiment of Fury. It's a 4 mana 4/3 elemental with trample. Land creatures you control have trample. It has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, you may have target land become a 3/3 elemental creature with haste until end of turn. It's still a land. This card is great.
Yeah, this is a really solid 4.
Yeah, this card has been. I've seen it in play. Like every time I've seen it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this card is a blowout.
Yeah,
like, how do you beat this? It's
kill it.
Just snap kill it. It's like so good. I saw somebody play this and then followed up with an Evolving Wilds, and I was like, oh my god.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's pretty brutal.
Yeah, they're like, next turn they were like Evolving Wilds, and I was like, oh my gosh. He just like looked at his hand and his cards in play. He's like,
Yeah, this is a very powerful red uncommon. The stats on it, I mean, 4/3 for 4 trample is pretty good anyways, and then the effect itself is just very, very, very strong.
Yeah. Once again, you may have the land. Like, you don't even have to do it.
Yep.
So, I think this card's pretty good. The next card we have is Immobile. I also give it a 4, by the way. Next card we have is Immobilizer Eldrazi. It's red and 1 for a 2/1 devoid. You can pay a colorless and 2. Each creature with toughness greater than its power can't block this turn. What? I haven't read this card yet.
I actually played it in my sealed deck, and I absolutely crushed my opponent because he had like Benthic Infiltrator, the 1/4 Vampire that gained life when you tap it. He had like Mist Intruder. I kid you not. I was like, and I had this guy in my hand, and I just like played out all my creatures, and then he had a couple blockers, and I like played this guy and then activated it, and he's like, "What does that do?" And I'm like, "None of your guys can block." So yeah, I like it. I think it's pretty good. I give it like a 3.
I'll give it a 2.5. I think that it's not quite. It's like, because here's the thing, is that like, if you're not going to take it highly enough, I don't see you in a situation where you're taking this card super high. So for that reason, like, because Grizzly Bears in draft seem to be like pretty hard to get, other red decks will take this card that you can't activate it. So it's going to be hard. I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm like a 2/1 for 2 is something I'm not unhappy playing a 2/1 for 2.
Right.
And sometimes the effect can be very powerful. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's.
I think it's better than your average 2.5, but I don't know that it gets to like that 3 range where I'm like considering taking this card really highly.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't take it. I wouldn't take it really high, but it's a card I would never cut from my deck. Probably.
That's true. That's true.
So.
Let's move on to Kazul's Toll Collector. This card is 2 and a red for a creature ogre warrior. It's a 3/2, and you can attach an equipment to it for free as a at sorcery speed to activate ability of 0. I played this card in sealed because I had a Captain's Claws and a weapons trainer and a cloak. And then every time I attached a cloak to it for free, it felt sweet. Because that's when cloak is good. I don't know. The card is like fine. I give it like a 2.
2.5. I mean, I'll always play a 3/2 for 3, which is basically basically what this is. I mean, the abilities. I'm surprised it was relevant for you because to me it's just a blank text box. So
Yeah, that's. I was like, oh, look at this. I got a weapons trainer and these two options. Huh, go figure.
I mean, if it happens, it happens. So.
It did. It happened. I was like, okay. My opponent was like sad. He was like, oh. I was like, yeah. Put this cloak on this. Go. How big is that? It's a 5/4. Next up we have Press into Service. It's 5 mana for a sorcery. Support 2. Gain control of target creature until end of turn. It has haste.
I've not played versus this card. I've not played with this card.
I don't think it's good.
I could see this card being really powerful. I mean,
in your sideboard.
I mean, there's some decks that want this effect, right? Like, I mean, there are decks.
I guess like a really red aggressive deck, like having this as your 5-drop, like steal your 6-drop, put counters on my guys, attack you is like pretty good.
Yeah, I think this is better than your normal Act of Treason effect because.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I mean, usually Act of Treason, that's usually the last card you play, right? I mean,
right.
Conventionally, it's
which is why the 5 mana cost doesn't bug you.
Yeah, because like you're not playing Act of Treason on turn 3. You're not like 2-drop Act of Treason, your 2-drop getcha. It's like, all right, we've like played out this game. You've got like 1 or 2 blockers. All right, Act of Treason your guy, smash you for a bunch of damage, and this just smashes you for even more damage. So I think this card is a little bit better than like than Act of Treason is. So I would say it's probably like a 2 or 2.5.
I think we're all right on the same page. That's what I was going to give it a 2 also. So, yeah. I mean, I think that inherently that what you're saying is correct. Like when you play your Act of Treason, it's like to end the game. Or to get close to that point where you can end it over the next turn. And Press into Service does do that. It just does it at the same turn. So yeah, I'll join you at it. I'll do it too as well. Next up we have Pyromancer's Assault. This card is 3 and a red for an enchantment. Whenever you cast a second spell each turn, Pyromancer's Assault deals 2 damage to target creature or player.
This is like a 1 for me, I think.
I think you specifically need like. I don't even know if you can build around this card.
Yeah, the problem is that like
it's a 4-drop.
Yeah, and your first trigger quote unquote replaces itself, right? So you trigger it once, you deal 2 damage to something, so you've effectively paid 4 mana for a shock at that point. If you can trigger it again, then maybe it's okay. But
I actually don't think. I think that the deck building, like the playing this card on 4 mana, means that like you can't just this can't be the first thing you do, right? So you can't like play this and have this grip full of spells. Yeah. So like the situations where you're like, oh well, you like just have a bunch of expedites and slip through spaces in your deck, like that doesn't seem very good.
Yeah, because when you
what if happens when you don't have any creatures, like.
Yeah, I mean, the reason, like, Burning Vengeance decks worked is because you were playing cards you would incidentally play in your deck anyways, right? Like, you're like, oh, I'm playing Silent Departures. Well, you would play Silent Departure in your deck anyways. Playing, like, Slip Through Space, you're not necessarily always, or especially Expedite, you're like, it's not great, you're not super happy to play it. And on top of that, like, a Burning Vengeance card, you only have to trigger, you do 2 flashback spells, right? This you have to play 4 spells to get 2 triggers off of it.
Yeah, I don't like this card. I actually think it's a 0. I don't think that you're ever correct playing this card.
Yeah, it's probably closer to a 0. I gave it a 1 because like maybe there's a deck out there for it, like right?
Yeah.
Like, maybe
I did Isolation Zone one of these once because they had like that was their first play.
Yeah.
I was like, oh well, I guess I have to Isolation Zone this.
Yeah, I mean maybe there's some weird, crazy, deck where you have 2 or 3 Pyromancer's Assaults and like grip or whatever, the tap your guy, draw a card, a bunch of cantrips. Like maybe there's some weird, crazy deck out there that actually works, but I think that it seems unlikely to me. And even if it does exist, if anybody is trying to fight you for it, like if it becomes some sort of weird narrow archetype and one other person tries to draft it, you're pretty much boned. So
let's go on to Reckless Bushwhacker. This card is 2 and a red for a 2/1 creature warrior creature goblin warrior ally. Sorry, my throat is getting. I'm like drinking room temperature water and it's still not working. This creature has haste and surge for red and 1. When it enters the battlefield, if its search cost was paid, creatures you control get +1, +0, and haste until end of turn. So I heard a lot of people say this is like a bad Goblin Bushwhacker. It's like basically the same card as Goblin Bushwhacker because you were already playing multiple spells in a turn the turns you were playing Goblin Bushwhacker.
Yep.
So it basically costs 1 red and 1 instead of 2 red. So it's like the same card, which is fine. It's actually better in limited than Goblin Bushwhacker because it's always a 2/1.
Yep.
That being said, how good is Goblin Bushwhacker in limited?
Usually not great. I'm a little bit happier with this guy, I think, than Bushwhacker.
They're both Bushwhacker, by the way.
Oh, I'm a little bit happier with Reckless Bushwhacker than Goblin Bushwhacker, because like you said, it's always a 2/1. So I don't know. I guess a 2. I mean, in a beatdown deck, it can be really powerful.
Yeah, like it's got a deck building cost to it, where like I think, which is awesome. I mean, when we say it's got a deck building cost to it, sometimes people are like, "Oh, that makes this card worse." Like that mean, but also it makes it so that if you want it, you can get it.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
If it's available in the draft and you want it, I mean, people aren't going to take it over you, right? So.
Yeah, and when it's in those kind of decks, the effect can be very powerful.
Yeah, I'm going to join you right at it too. Like, it's totally fine, and like, I mean, I think there's also beat decks that don't want it. Like, you can be the beatdown deck and not want this card because, so like, I don't know. Do you think that you would sideboard this card in if you knew you would beat down in a matchup?
If I knew I was the beatdown in a matchup?
So you're not an inherent, like, attack every turn deck, but you're playing in a matchup where you are the beatdown deck. Would you sideboard this card in?
No, because to me, limited is different than constructed in the who's the beatdown sense.
Because it can change so rapidly.
Yeah, because, like, in limited, like, your role in a match is going to be flip-flopping, like, almost every turn some games. Like, some games you're like, I'm the beatdown, and then some games you're like, no, he's the beatdown on the very next turn. And that happens in limited. In constructed, it doesn't really happen, right? In constructed, it's always like, I'm deck X, therefore I'm the beatdown, my opponent is deck Y, therefore they're the control deck. And and sometimes that changes, and sometimes you can sideboard into a deck, but in constructed, roles tend to be much more defined, whereas in limited, like, you're constantly going back and forth, and if I get a draw where my opponent's beating me down and I draw a Reckless Bushwhacker, I'm going to be pretty sad.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. Like, there's not a situation, I mean, that's not true. I think there is a situation where, like, if they're, like, the slowest, grindiest control deck, I could see myself, like, wanting this card, and maybe even maybe even boarding in, like, some 2/1 in my sideboard for 2 and, like, this card. But I think that it's so rare because of exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so, I mean, yeah, there may be some situations where you want to board this in to try and be aggressive. Like, for example, let's say you're playing versus a deck and they have a bunch of bombs in it. And you're like, okay, I can't beat the bombs when it goes to the late game.
Right, so you have to do something.
Yeah.
And so that something can be like, all right, well, I'm going to board in some Goblin Pikers in this.
Yeah. So, I mean, in that situation, yes, I could see boarding in Reckless Bushwhacker to try and beat down your opponent or whatever.
Sure.
But if, like, say your two decks are fairly similar, but, you know, you're like, maybe my deck feels a little bit faster, then in that case, I don't necessarily want Reckless Bushwhacker.
I think that, like, that's actually just a great point too. Like, let's say that both of your decks are super aggressive. I don't think Reckless Bushwhacker helps me in a board stall because it doesn't pump toughness. So I could even see boarding it out in those situations for a 4 mana creature that's bigger than it, or like a 6 mana 5/5. I could see wanting that over this in those kind of matchups.
Sure.
Next up we have Tears of Volokut. It's 1 and a red for an instant. It's basically plummet. It can't be countered and it deals 5 damage to target creature with flying. I think this is just a sideboard card. In some sealed decks you might want to play it in the main deck, but I think that this is a sideboard card.
Yeah, it's plummet. So like I don't know what plummet is. A 2?
I would just say that plummet just belongs in the sideboard.
Yep.
Baloth Pup is the first green uncommon. I cannot decide how I feel about this card, literally at all. So it's 1 green and 1 for a 3/1 beast, and it has trample as long as it gets a 1/1 counter. I'm totally fine playing 3/1s for 2 in limited, but this one bugs me. I don't know why. Probably because it's green, and I want more toughness on my green creatures. How do you feel about this card?
It's fine. It's like a 2.5. I'll always play it in my green decks.
If you can support twice on this card, it becomes pretty good. But I even support once on it is whatever.
I mean, but if you can support twice on any creature, it's good. So
yeah, that's true. That's why its text just doesn't make sense to me. Maybe that's why it bugs me. It's why did you put this on this?
I mean, it's better than no text, right?
Yeah, but
yeah, I agree. It's basically a 3/1 for 2 without really a text box. So you're gonna play it in your green decks. It's not like a super high pick.
I'd have rather had it be a Watch Wolf. Can we just have it be a Watch Wolf instead?
Well, sure. I mean, 3/3s for 2 are very powerful. So
yeah, I give you the 2.5. It's whatever. It's like a card. Sometimes you'll play. Why is it an uncommon? Maybe that's what all of it coming together just bugs me. It's
there's a bunch of little things. Is it the fact that it's a beast too? Does that bother you too?
No, I'm fine with that. It's just this uncommon that's just this mediocre card that and it's oh look, it does something cool. It gets trampled if it has 1/1 counters. It's like a pup, so when it grows, it gets bigger. Well, no, duh. Everything grows when it gets bigger. I don't understand what you're trying to say. I don't know. Everything about this card bugs me. The art is cool looking though. He's attacking a frog, and that's cool.
I actually just read the flavor text. It's kind of cute.
Oh, what does it say?
A young Baloth channels its energy into playful destructiveness. Over time, it becomes less playful, but no less destructive.
Okay.
So it's a young, playful, destructive pup.
Maybe I'm gonna buy this art. This art is actually sweet. Next up, we have Birthing Hulk. What is that? What is that art on your wall? Oh, it's a card in limited I hated. Why did you buy it? Birthing Hulk is 6 and a green for a 4/5 Eldrazi drone. It's devoid. When it enters the battlefield, put 2 colorless Eldrazi Scions into play. You can pay a colorless and 1 to regenerate it. This card is great.
I think it's a solid 3.
Yeah.
The fact that it's 7 mana, I mean, it's a
7/6.
Kind of. I mean, but it's the fact that you get you get 3 creatures for 7 is pretty good, and it is a pretty large body. And it protects itself. The large part of it protects itself immediately, right? You can regenerate with the spawn tokens.
Yes, exactly. That's something that people haven't been talking about that I wanted to hit on, so I'm glad you brought it up. It inherently protects itself right off the bat. I've been impressed. I actually am going to give this card a 3.5. This is the kind of card that actually draws me into the color. You have to do a lot to get me excited about a 7 mana card. And this one does a lot for me. Being able to protect itself in the decks, right off the bat. If you untap with it, it protects itself twice right off the bat, right? This card does enough things for me to give it that 3.5 range. Where I'm in second, third pick range for this card.
Yeah, I maybe don't want to take it quite as high. I like the blue 7-drop more than this. So
sure.
I give it a 3.
The 7-drop sorcery?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know that I could. I would rather have the 7-drop sorcery in my deck, but I don't know that I could bring myself to take a 7-drop sorcery over a creature.
That kind of sorcery I could.
Okay.
I mean, it's not upheaval, but
sure. Next up, we have Bonds of Mortality. I also want to note, by the way, that I think green is so much better in this set than Battle for Zendikar.
You know what? I'm still not impressed with green. I'm just
wow.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't feel like I don't know what the draw to green is. I'm like, all right, I got some more vanilla creatures, I guess.
Okay. Next up we have Bonds of Mortality. It's a green and 1. It's an enchantment that's unplayable. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card, and you can pay a green to give a creature, get rid of, have a creature lose hexproof or indestructible.
I like how you preface that by saying it's unplayable.
When are you playing this?
In the, what was that red enchantment called again? In the red enchantment deck.
Oh, because it cantrips, so you'll play it with
Sure. Are there things that have hexproof in this format?
There's mythics that have indestructible.
I don't even care about indestructible. There's a ton of like exile removal spells.
Yeah, I don't know. This card's a 0. Don't play this card. Don't sideboard it in. Like.
Yeah, it's basically unplayable.
Okay. Next up we have Embodiment of Insight. This card is 4 and a green for a vigilant creature with your lands have vigilance, and it has landfall whenever you play a land. It's a 3/3.
This is, I think it's slightly worse than the red one.
I think it's a little bit worse too because it's an extra mana.
Yeah, I mean, you're paying 5 for a 4/4 as opposed to 4 for a 4/3, so the body's worse. The effect.
And Vigilance is pretty powerful. Vigilance, I think, is like one of the better abilities in Limited.
But Vigilance, it's interesting because the creature, it stops becoming a creature at the end of turn, so it's not like you get.
This creature has Vigilance.
Oh, okay, I got you. Yeah. So you can block with it after you attack with it. I think.
You can attack with your lands and cast spells with them during your second main phase.
Yeah, as long as they don't get blocked. So, it's like
even if they get blocked. I mean, if they get killed, you can't. But if they.
Well, generally when somebody's blocking, I'm assuming you're trading. So.
Sure.
I gave it like a 3/5.
Yeah, 3/5 as well. This is another one that like kind of draws me into green. It's sad that it's a little bit worse than the red one, but I still like the card. The next one we have is Harvester Troll. This is another card that I just would not ever play.
Yeah, it's like a 1 and a 1.5.
Yeah, so it's a 3 and a green for a 2/3 troll. When it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a creature or a land. If you do, put 2/1/1 counters on it. This card is like a 7-drop that I just don't. Why would you play this card?
Yeah, you know what I was thinking? I'm like, why isn't this a 3/3? Is that having 3 power too powerful?
Yeah, I don't understand why it's a 2/3.
Yeah, I mean, if it was a 3/3, I would probably be a little bit not happier. I would be more inclined to play it, but
I do not. I think that like this card has such a huge downside of costing 4 mana.
Yeah,
it could have cost 3 mana. It could have, had 3 power. Like none of the things on this card make up this. Like you can't sacrifice a land on turn 4. Like that's not happening.
No.
You can't sacrifice a creature. Like, what are you sacrificing?
Nope. Don't.
Maybe if you play, I don't know, like a
summoner,
summoner into this.
Yeah, don't play this card.
Yeah, this card's bad. I don't even want to give it a 1. Like, what incentivized you to put this card into your deck?
I don't know.
I'm gonna give it a 0. I don't think you should play this card.
Alright, that's fair. I can see that. Yeah, I will never play this card either, so.
Nissa's Judgment is next. It's 4 and a green for a sorcery. Support 2. Choose up to 1 target creature an opponent controls. Each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it deals damage equal to its power to that creature. This is the card we were looking for last set. This card I have now seen kill just about every size creature in the format. This is, I actually have this card as so because of where green sits and what green does, I give this card a 4. I think that it is the best green uncommon, and it will pull you into that. And it basically kills any creature with very little downside to you because it's not like they can pump their creature to kill your creatures. They could kill your creature to save their creature, but that didn't do anything. It wasn't an inherent downside for them to kill your creature to save their creature, right? You still got, the +1/+1 counter on your other creature. They still spent a card, which you got the card out of this card. Nothing about that transaction was a 2-for-1 for you, right?
Yeah, this is a 3.5 or a 4 for me. It's generally going to always kill whatever you're targeting. Even like, let's say you're targeting.
I've seen it kill Eldrazi. Like, it's...
Yeah. I mean, it can definitely kill Eldrazi, but let's say they don't have an Eldrazi. Let's say they have, some 3 or 4 toughness creature, and you play this, and you target their thing. Odds are they can't even save their creature by killing your creatures.
Exactly. Like, the power of +1/+1 counters is, like, oftentimes just not recognized by people. It's like, oh, it's just some +1/+1 counters. But, like, those changed board state significantly. I think that's one of the things that people didn't realize going into, like, Innistrad with travel preparations. They're like, oh, it's just, like, some card. And it's like, well, that's a lot of power and toughness for that, like, all rolled into one, right?
Yep.
And this is Judgment. Every time I've seen it cast, I'm like, wow, that card is, like, so annoying. So good. Like, I agree. Like, killing a 4/4 with it is basically easy peasy lemon squeezy. Like, you are going to have a 3/3 in play. Like, that's going to happen, which means that it's so hard for them to stop you from killing their guy. I give this card a 4. Next up we have this card is offensive. This card is called Ruin in Their Wake. It's a 3/1 for a sorcery devoid. Search your library for a basic land card. You may put the card onto the battlefield tapped if you control a land named Waste. Otherwise, put it into your hand. This is offensive.
I like how upset you are.
In Constructed, it's like, what are you doing to us?
Hey, look, alright, I had to give up Mana Leak, you have to give up Rampant Growth.
I also had to give up Mana Leak. It's not like I didn't give up Mana Leak.
I'm just saying, I understand, clearly not Rampant Growth, and...
It's an uncommon.
Yeah, and cards like this kind of scream at you saying, like, we're never reprinting Rampant Growth ever again, and then that kind of maybe makes you sad, so...
Like, this is... I mean, I can understand. You guys goofed it with Farseek. That's not our fault. That is not our fault that you were like, what would be cute if we had Farseek in the same set as as Dual Lands. We're so smart. And yeah, you guys goofed. That's not my fault.
So for the limited rating, I would give it like a 1 or a 0.5.
It's like a 1. Like, sometimes you'll play this card. Like, in your waste stack, it makes it so the cost of waste goes down for you a little bit. And like, if like you're like legitimately 3 colors with wastes, like if you have like 4 wastes in your deck, for example, which is a lot of waste, by the way. I don't even know that like that could happen. So it's kind of interesting because it's like bad color fixing.
Yeah, you can also get waste with this, right? So
yeah, you can. Yeah.
So if you want to get a waste, you can get it. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, it's a 1.
Yeah, I'll give it a 1 as well. And I'm offended. Seath Guardian is next. It's green 2 for a 3/4 reach elemental. When it dies, put an XX green elemental token onto the battlefield. Equal to the number of creatures you control, where X is equal to the number of creatures in your graveyard. So you get when this dies, you get a 1/1 minimum. If it dies specifically, and then other times you get like up to whatever size it can be.
This is probably my favorite green card. I give it like a 4.
I also give this card a 4. I think this and this as Judgment are my 2 favorite green uncommons, and I think. Which, by the way, I would like to state that you're saying you're not sure how you feel about green, and we have given every single green uncommon, other than 2 of them, 3s or higher.
Sure.
No, that's not true. Baloth Pup was an uncommon. Why is that card an uncommon?
Yeah, I mean, basically there's just been 2, like, really good green uncommons, and then you have the Hulk, which is reasonable. But yeah, I think Sea Guardian is very powerful. If this had a vanilla text box, if it was just a 3/4 reach for 4, it's a very powerful card. The fact that you get a creature when it dies is like really, really strong. This is like Penumbra Spider from Time Spiral, but it's a little bit bigger, and you have the potential to have a giant creature. Sometimes it'll just be a 1/1 or a 2/2, but so pretty good card.
I think that the reach is going to be one of those things that people are like, they'll like legitimately attack into it and be like, what do you mean block? Reach? So I love those cards. I love cards like that a lot. So that's it for green uncommons. We're gonna move on to multicolor. This has a cycle of uncommons. So it actually has more uncommons, I think, than every other color. So let's get started with Baloth Adol. This card is 4, a green and a black for a zombie beast. It's a 4/5, and when it enters the battlefield, you may return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. This card's a 4 for me. I actually think this card is great. Every time I saw it cast, it was insane.
3.5 for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does what it says it does, right? Like sometimes it gets 1, sometimes it gets 2. When it doesn't, it's a 4/5, which is like not the greatest rate for 6 mana, but like it does what you think it does, and it does a good job at doing it.
Yeah, I mean it's basically just souped up Gravedigger. So, and Gravedigger's a pretty powerful card. This has actually good stats.
Right.
And the fact that sometimes you're going to get 2 of your best creatures is pretty powerful.
Yeah. Next up we have Cliffhaven Vampire. It's 2 and a white and a black for a 2/4 flying vampire warrior ally. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. I've seen this card do work. It's also in that 2/4 spot, 2/4 flyer spot. I give this card a 3.
Yeah, 3. Yeah, three sounds about right to me. 2/4 flyer for 4 has an incidental effect that happens to slot perfectly into the colors. So
yeah, Flare Drone is next. It's 1, a black and a red. It's an Eldrazi drone. It's devoid. First strike. Whenever another colorless creature you enters the battlefield under your control, target opponent loses 1 life. 3/1 first strike for 3 is like really powerful. I give this card a 3 also.
Yeah, also a 3.
Yeah, there's not like a ton to say about this. Like you're gonna have incidental colorless creatures, but just the body on this card is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, yep, like you said, a 3 power first striker for 3 mana is pretty strong.
Draga Auxiliary is a green, white, and 1 for an elf soldier ally. It's a 2/3. It has supports 2 for green, white, and 4. This card is fine. Like, I think this is the worst of the cycle.
I actually like it a little bit better than Flare Drone. Because I think this is the kind of card that it's reasonable on curve. It's not like exciting. It's basically, like you said earlier, it's a Minotaur. But when you get to the point in the game when you got to start activating it, it can absolutely take over a game.
Okay. So where are you at? Are you also on a 3 on it still though?
Yeah, I'm on a 3. I mean, it's not like a top tier removal spell or anything like that, or some crazy uncommon creature. But the fact that you can have this in your deck and it can take over the game is pretty good, I think. And like I said, it's you're not unhappy playing this on turn 3.
Awesome. Next up we have Mind Melter. Well, that's a powerful name. Is that the name? Is that really Mind Melter? Okay.
Mind Melter. Yep.
Well, this card better be good. So it better melt my mind. We have 1, a black, and a blue for an Eldrazi drone. Devoid. It can't be blocked. It's a 2/2, and you can pay colorless and 3 to exile a card from exile a card. Target opponent exiles a card from his or her hand. Activate this ability only anytime you can cast a sorcery. This card's really strong.
Yeah. 3 or a 3/5 for me.
Yeah, I'm willing to go up to 3/5 for this one. Like, this card's really good.
Yeah, I mean, there's
even if you just like stop it can't be blocked. Like, this card is still pretty powerful. I'm a pretty big fan of Phantom Warriors, and this is like way better than a Phantom Warrior.
Yeah, I mean, if you can curve this into activating the ability, granted, you're like, generally what ends up happening is when you're doing things like this, you're saying, all right, I'm willing to take a little bit of damage. I'm willing to lose a little bit of tempo to knock your hand out.
Right, and the thing is like once they're getting to the point where you have 4 mana, they have 4 or 5 mana, the cards in their hand become very good. So even if you activate this on turn 5, right? Like, let's say you play a 4-drop after this and start activating it, you're hitting pretty relevant stuff usually. They do get a pick, but it's still powerful.
Yeah, I mean, the real key to cards like this is like you can actually really punish your opponent, especially if your opponent stumbles at all. You can really punish your opponent if you get to activate this multiple times.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a 4. I think it's actually like really good. Next up, we have Reflector Mage. And I'm sure this is your favorite card in the cycle.
Oh, yeah, this card is awesome.
It's white and blue and 1 for a 2/3. When it enters the battlefield, return target creature and opponent controls to its owner's hand. That creature's owner can't cast spells with the same name as that creature until your next turn.
Yeah, I don't know if it's close to a 4, maybe inching up to 4.5, but definitely a very, very, very firm 4.
I give this card a 4 also. I think that these multicolor cards are like all really strong, and they all pull you. Remember, I think when we were talking about the uncommons, like in Battle for Zendikar, I think they also had a cycle of allied color uncommons, right?
They did, yep.
And when we were talking about those cards, I don't think any of them were on this power level. Like these uncommons are way, way better than those ones. Like when you think about like Skyrider Elf or Resolute Blade Master, like I'm not taking a Resolute Blade Master like second pick. It's not happening very often, right? Or like a Grove Rumbler as but like these cards, a lot of these I could see taking pretty highly.
Yeah, I mean, Reflector Mage is the kind of card that you're really happy first picking and hopefully ending up in a blue-white deck.
Yeah. Yep. Next up we have Relentless Hunter. It is a green and a red and 1 for a 3/3 human warrior. You have an activated ability of a green, a red, and a 1 to give it +1/+1 and trample until end of turn. I think this card's pretty good. It's like 3 for me.
Yeah, it's a 3. I mean, it's a 3/3 for 3, and then the fact that it makes blocking for your opponent pretty difficult is nice. So.
Yep. Next up we have Storm Chaser Mage. It's a red, a blue for a flying haste human wizard. It's a 1/3 and it has prowess. This card is a 3 for me also. I think it's better than its stats look. I think 1/3 flyers for 3 are just better than people realize in limited. So for that reason, I give it like a 3 because it has this awesome upside of also having haste and prowess.
Yeah, I would say 2.5 or a 3. I mean, 1/3 flyers are decent, but they're not. I'm not necessarily like, oh yeah, ooh, a 1/3 flyer. You know.
Sure.
Occasionally, yeah, you can pump it up to a 2/4 sometimes. So. Like I had what was the blue common, the 2/1 for 2, and I actually triggered prowess a couple times, and I only needed to trigger it once sometimes to be able to attack into creatures with it, so it does come up.
Next up we have Void Grafter. This is one of my favorite cards in the set, obviously. This is 1, a blue, and a green for a 2/4 Devoid Flash, and when it enters the battlefield, target creature you control gains hexproof until end of turn. This card is sweet.
Yeah, that is a pretty awesome card. 3.5.
I want to give it a 3.5 also. Like, just a 2/4 flash for 3 is like something you would just play.
Yep.
And
yeah,
this card has like blowout potential, like blanking their removal spell on like your best creature and leaving you with a 2/4. Like, I love this card. I'm gonna give it a 3.5.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty strong card. Not quite as good as Reflector Mage, obviously, but
no, I don't think so either.
I think it's better than the blue-black creature too.
I'm not sure. I like Baloth Mill and the blue-black creature quite a bit. I think those 3 are pretty close to each other. I think Reflector Mage is the best, though.
Well, yeah, I mean, Reflector Mage, I think far and away is the best. But, yeah, I like this card a lot. Like you said, it's a 2/4 flash for 3 is something you'd be really happy playing anyways. Being able to ambush in combat is great. And then, yeah, the fact that you can just, like, you know, they play some big expensive removal spell and you're like, nope, and you get a body out of it is really powerful.
Okay, I actually forgot this was in the cycle. This is actually the worst of the cycle. Next up we have Weapons Trainer. It's a red and one for a red and a white for a 3/2 human soldier ally. Other creatures you control get +1/+0 as long as you control an equipment. The equipment in this set, for those wondering, are Stoneforge Masterwork are rare. Captain's Claws are rare. Captain's Claws is like the best equipment in the set. Strider Harness, uncommon, that's not good. Bonesaw, common, that you probably shouldn't be playing. And Cloak, which is a really expensive uncommon to activate. So I think this card's like a 2.5. 2.5.
Yeah, Probably, yeah, 2.5.
Like, it is a 3-2. Like, the thing is, like, a 3-2 for 2 just doesn't matter. It's not actually that different from being a 2-2 for 2. And it's in red-white. Like, so it costs red-white. I don't know. Like, I'm not impressed with anything about this card. Like, it was very good for me when I had Captain Claus in play. But, like, that's very specific.
Yeah, definitely the worst of the cycle.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to artifacts. Cloak we have, which is... How do you say this card? Do you know?
Chitinous.
Chitinous Cloak is 3 for an artifact equipment. It gives a creature +2/+2 and has Menace. It equips for 3 mana. This card is like a 2. I think that there are times where you will play this card, but I don't know that you'll ever be happy about it.
Yeah, I'm closer to a 1.5 on it.
Sure. Yeah, there's like... It's so expensive to equip that it's hard to like give this a good grade.
Yeah, it's so much mana for the effect you're getting.
Yeah. Next we have Strider's Harness. This is 3 mana for an equipment. It gives creature +1/+1 in haste, and you can pay 1 mana to equip it. I actually think this card is a 0. You should never play this card.
It's like a 0.5.
Even let's say that I had triple Weapons Trainer. Would you play this card?
No, it's not even having like a equipment relevant creature that would maybe make me want to play this card. No, it's basically unplayable.
Yeah, I think that I think it might have been on Limited Resources. LLC was talking about this card, where he said that when you equip for 1, you're paying an extra mana to give your creature +1/+1 in haste. So the relevant thing here is obviously the haste. It's like the most important part. But you're attacking the same turn you would have attacked with the creature anyway, had you just played it on time.
Yeah, yep, absolutely true. Usually paying mana to give, paying additional mana to give something haste is not that great of an effect, because you have to play the card, then add additional mana to give it haste. The reason cards like, for example, Goblin War Chief are so powerful is because you don't pay mana for the effect.
Yeah, or things like Lightning Griefs.
Yep. Yeah, that's a really good example.
It's just not worth it. So, that's it for the artifacts. So the only uncommon lands we have are the cycle of multicolored allied color lands. What do you think of these in this set? Like, where are you rating these in this set compared to other sets?
I mean, they're like, you're always gonna play it, but I'm not necessarily like really taking them very high. These aren't really like 3 color sets, right? You know, your mana fixing isn't super important.
I think the one thing that I've heard that I agreed with is when you play one, it means that your waste is almost free, right? You now have the same number of sources, quote unquote, that you would have had you not played the waste for those colors, right? And so the thing to remember with that though is there's still a cost of having the waste in play.
Right. I mean, that's not exactly how that works out, because, you know, if you don't draw your dual land, like, you know, for example, let's say you're like, well, instead of this waste, I would have played an island, and you're in a blue-white deck, and your opening hand is 2 plains and a waste, and you have a bunch of blue cards, you might have to mulligan that hand. Whereas if you have 2 plains and an island, you probably aren't mulliganing that hand. Right. So there's still a very tangible cost to having a waste in your deck, even if you have like dual lands in your deck. The more dual lands you have, so like, for example, say you had like 3 blue-white dual lands in your blue-white deck, then the cost starts to become even more mitigated, because, you know, now all of a sudden if you have 2 dual lands and a waste, that hand's much better than 2 plains and a waste.
That hand's great.
Yeah.
And you can play a 2-drop, you can play a couple 2, yeah, that hand is fantastic, so. Yeah, I think that you're just gonna always play them when you have them. Like,
yeah, you're always gonna play them. You're obviously not taking them over like a good playable card for your deck. You know, they might be picked more middling packs, you know, like 6th, 7th pick, somewhere around there. So
I went on the MTG Focus, their last limited set review, and the only thing that I really like, and that was my first time reading a lot of these cards, and one thought that I had is, if you can get enough of these, Converge gets really good pack 3.
That's true also, and you can take those awesome gold creatures we were talking about too and play a lot of those.
Yeah, but it seems so unlikely to like abuse converge with these that I don't know. It's fine. They're all fine. So, well, that's it. What did you think? What did you think was the best color as far as uncommons go?
Interesting question. Let me think about this. White had some good ones. I think it's funny because like I'm trying not to let my color bias kind of influence my decision. So I think I'm gonna go with white. Mostly because of Reflector Mage is what really kind of pushes me to white because I think you have some pretty good uncommons. You have like the destroy and attacking creature, you've got the good support creature, and then you've got, Reflector Mage, which I think is a really, really powerful creature.
I think white is also the only one that had no ones or zeros.
It had the indestructible card, right? The +1/+0.
Sure.
Indestructible.
But I think we gave that a 1.52 range, didn't we?
Probably, yeah, because it's like something you could play.
Right. So that I think that for me it's white or green, and I hate playing white. But I think that Seed Guardian, Nissa's Judgment, and Embodiment of Insight add up to a lot of really good cards. We did give 2 zeros in green uncommons, which is probably why we also gave 2 4s. Right? It's the only one that had 2 uncommons at that power level, whereas white had, I guess white also did, right? Because white had Immolating Glare and Believe Captain. So I guess white, yeah. I guess I'd give white the best uncommons.
Yeah, I like white a lot, and yeah.
Yeah. I think that it's, that red probably was, and it's interesting because commons and uncommons are going to make up the most, so next week we'll do commons and we'll see where we're at there. But, that's it for this week. Shoutouts, Drew?
I want to give a shout out to you, Spencer, for doing weekly podcasts, or I guess bi-weekly or bi-monthly in our case, but doing podcasts. I've done editing for content before, and I know it takes a lot of work and a lot of time to do that. So shout out to you for hosting the show and keeping it going and being consistent and all that kind of stuff. And
honestly, it's really bad that we missed last week. I just couldn't do it.
No, that's fine. I understand. And honestly, I was going to say, with my new job, I haven't had a lot of time to play Magic in my free time, and I feel like going on the show and talking about Magic has actually been able to keep me more in the loop than I would have been, and so I think that helped me out a lot with my limited PPTQ win. So, yeah, shout out to you, Spencer.
Talking about limited every week, doing the show means 2 things for me. 1, I'm more likely to do a draft throughout the week, because I want to be up to date on the set when I go into the podcast. And 2, because of that, I'm better at limited Magic, and I get to talk with somebody who I appreciate in you, Drew. So I appreciate that you feel the same way about it.
Yep, absolutely. So I appreciate that, because basically I basically just hop on and get to talk about Magic, and I know you do all the behind the scenes work, all the legwork, all the groundwork, and I understand the amount of effort that goes into that, and I appreciate that. The fact that you're able to do that consistently is awesome. Awesome.
Well, I definitely appreciate that. I'd like to give a shout out to the listeners. I know we actually have different listeners for this than we do for constructive criticism a little bit. I hope that we can cross some of that. I also hope that as I start putting the show on YouTube soon, that we can start getting YouTube listeners. We're starting a YouTube channel for constructive criticism. This show will be on it every week. So there's a lot of things that I'm doing to increase listenership. So if you like the show, please share it with your friends. Let them know about it. I'm trying to not be the same thing as other limited podcasts out there. I know, for example, Loading Ready Run does a little bit of limited stuff. Limited resources obviously exists, but I want this show to have a different feel to it. That's why the uncommon and the common set reviews are so important to the show, because it leads us directions so that we have a starting point for a format and then evolve with the format and get to talk about it every week in a different way. So Let us know if you have any questions about our thoughts on the uncommons, and if you disagree with something, let us know. Maybe we missed something. It's even possible we missed grading an uncommon. Like, let us know. And thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you guys all the next time we record. Technically, we're supposed to record next week, so we might see you next week.
Yep, we will see you guys whenever we see you.
All right, bye everybody.